Finovate showcases cutting-edge banking and financial technology through a global conference series featuring short-form demos and thought leadership. Now, the conversation continues on the Finovate podcast.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Finovate podcast. We've got a fun one for you today. Joining me, we have Pete Cherecwich, president of Northern Trust Asset Servicing. Pete, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Excellent. Well, I think most people have probably heard of Northern Trust, or if you haven't, you should have. But can you start by giving us just a quick background on yourself and Northern Trust priorities?
Sure. So I'll start with what Northern Trust is real quick. So if you have an investment in a 401k plan or a pension plan, you get a statement, you look at that statement, you say, okay, it says I have $10,000. How do you know that's accurate? How do you know there's stocks and bonds behind that? That's what we do. We make sure those numbers are accurate. We make sure those assets are there. But we do it with 14,500 partners, around 26 locations, 2,700 clients, and 53 countries around the globe.
So basically just like a little mom and pop shop, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the things that I really wanted to talk about is, how Northern Trust tech stack has evolved over the past few years. And I'm particularly curious to hear about, how you've tackled the questions around prioritization. How do you decide where are the areas you really want to prioritize and focus on, and which areas you think maybe you can tackle a little bit later on?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. That's a huge question, so it might take me a little bit. But I'll start by saying, in order to make sure those statements are accurate, it is very much a technology-based business because we have to account for everything from a share of IBM to Bitcoin. So put that in your head. Now, prioritization, I'll start there. Really, we have clients, we have risk and resiliency things, and we have productivity. So when we try to prioritize, we love to hit all three. Is it benefiting the client? Is it improving our risk statements? And is it giving us productivity? And if you think about it, right, something where a client can do something themselves, they're happier, they can get it fast. It eliminates risk because I don't have to do the input, and it gives us more productivity. That's the end game. So then if we sit back and think about how does that translate into our tech stack? And reality is we really take a multi-prong approach when looking at what we want to do. But in order to get things done, we have to have an end game in mind. So we have something called our North Star. And our North Star is an application architecture that says, this is where we want to end up when we're done building. Now, ironically, you're never done, but it's nice to have a picture. Then we look at the prongs. So number one is we want to have an event-based architecture and use microservices. And what do I mean by that? We want to do something that almost looks like a manufacturing plant. So if you think of raw materials in, processing, and then end results for the client. An event-based architecture will say a trade of IBM, that's a raw material. Then any system that we have that's interested in that trade, they would get updated, almost like they want to subscribe to that information. Then they would publish the results back for the valuation of that, and all the systems that are interested get updated. So that's in a nutshell, that event-based architecture is key because that enables you to get the data right up front, right? And so that quality control up front, just like any manufacturing, is really important. That brings you to data. Ultimately, we're a data business. So the world has moved towards really creating technology like Calibra, other types of tech stacks that enable you to have data products that are created by our line. An example might be, if a client says, I want to be updated on my cash. Well, cash is interesting because cash can be, what's my cash right now in my bank account? But cash can also be, what's the projected cash? So almost like, I know this is going to date myself, but what's in my checkbook? Because your checkbook doesn't exactly match what's in your bank balance because somebody hasn't cashed it yet. It's projected. So what is the client interested? You don't just say cash, you have to define it, and you have to say, where are you getting all that data from? The tools that are out there enable you to do that in a really effective way that enables you to move fast. Anyone that's interested in a particular data item and data product can then use it for their system. That's both internally and externally. The next piece, we want to go into the cloud. And that means not only having the cloud available for platforms, but really developing cloud native applications. So we recently did a deal with a company called Finborn, where they have an accounting application where we're going to put it into our architecture and use it for a piece of what they do. And then, assuming that works very well, gives us a lot of optionality to do more. But the reality is, I think over time, everything is going to be cloud-based. And it's not just taking something that wasn't built for the cloud. It's got to be cloud native. That's where you're going to get all your advantage and speed to market. Next piece, fintech's investments. We cannot invest in everything. Sorry, we cannot build everything ourselves, right? We have to figure out where we need help. So we actually created a group called Investment Data Science, and we've done investments in companies like Ascension Analytics, Equity Data Science, Two Sigma, Venn product, where we offer these products to our clients. And why do we choose those clients? Why do we choose those products? We choose those products because there's something that they have, something that their IP, we haven't developed it. And we think they're going to go faster by being a standalone. So we don't want to buy them, right? We want to be able to let them keep building and going fast. We then have a great brand. We have the 2,700 clients. We ultimately can be an introducer. So we introduce a great product for our clients. Our clients are happy. The fintech's happy. We're a part owner. We're happy. Everyone's good. And finally, really is we're a Microsoft shop. So I've taken the plunge into Microsoft Dynamics, Office 365, and how we're going to operate with our clients and have that service layer via Microsoft, and how we leverage that internally, I think is going to revolutionize actually how we run the business. I'll stop there.
No, that's excellent. I really appreciate the thoroughness of the response. And there's so much there to cover and to unpack. I'm not even going to really try, but I will say, I think anybody listening might want to just go back and re-listen to those 5 minutes again, especially on kind of the fintech innovator side. Some really good insights there. I do have one question though, following up on that. Are there any aspects of your digital transformation that you wish you'd started sooner?
Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes I always wonder whether first we should be a fast follower or should we be a leader? And I would say for most technologies, I want to be a fast follower, partly because we're a regulated bank. And so, it's a little less risky if somebody else tries it before. Second is the technology moves so fast that the price point comes down dramatically for, the people that go second and third. And given that we're in the institutional business where I'm not trying to get 1 billion users, I just have 2,700 clients where I have to satisfy, fast follower works well. That being said, where would I have done differently? I think I would have been militant in the past about eliminating point-to-point feeds in the organization. If you think in the old days, right, the best way to get data, a developer, they would find out where the data they want is, they would do a point-to-point feed, put it into their system, and off and running, their product works. The problem is that you wake up years later and you've got hundreds and thousands of these point-to-point feeds that make testing very difficult, that make pulling out and changing that platform very difficult. So if there's any advice I'd give to anyone, the sooner you can put boxes around services, and whether it's a microservice or service-oriented architecture, whatever you want to call it, if you put a bubble around each one so that stands alone and then the data comes out is the data, you'll just be better off in the future for sure.
Yeah, and I think a lot of different types of companies have fallen into that trap or something similar to it, where you have a lot of people who are just making things for right now, making something which needs to solve an immediate need and not necessarily thinking about the longer term. How sustainable is this? How scalable is this? And obviously, there's really big potential implications down the road if you end up falling into that pitfall.
Yes, absolutely. Your costs go way up. There's no question, right? The more you can pay the money up front to do it right, the better off you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are airing this episode during Finovate Spring, which is obviously our showcase of new innovations in financial technology. And so I feel obligated to ask, are there any subgenres of fintech that you're watching particularly closely at the moment, or any big opportunities that you see on the horizon?
Yeah, it's funny. So AI is it for me. All right. So I'm an old guy. And I go back to when the internet was created. And I would say at the beginning, none of us knew what it was going to be for. All right. You've got mail. Great. So how's that going to impact my life? But we knew deep down, we knew this was going to change everything. All right. And it has. social media, everything's been changed. AI is the same thing. AI will change the world. We just haven't figured out yet how it's going to change the world. But a couple of things we have figured out. I do believe strongly that AI will help us eliminate mistakes that humans make. There's a lot of things in the financial services world where we're processing a transaction, we're reading a document, where we've got a 4-eye check to make sure someone books this trade correctly. That might be $100 million. Let's hope they don't transpose something. Having all of that done automatically by reading this documentation via AI will, I just think, help us unbelievably. Ending up with reconciliations, right? We have reconciliations all over the world. Having AI look at this is the actual recon presented to you so that you can say yes or no saves tons and tons of time. And then client service. I mean, funny enough, and I can't make this up, I wrote my first email to a client today that was generated via Gen AI Copilot, right, on Microsoft Outlook. And it was a strange feeling. It's like, all right, so here's a couple paragraph email that was created off a 5 bullet point prompt that I put in there, made a couple changes, but it probably saved me 15 minutes of doing that. And frankly, it was a better writer than I was. And I'm like,
Oh, here we
okay,
go.
game on. Here we
Here
go.
we go. There's that slippery slope now. You're caught on it now. You're in. No, I think it's really a fair point, and especially when you come back to what you're talking about earlier, the importance of kind of having all the data readily available. People didn't necessarily know that all of that data was going to be so important when it comes to training AI solutions, right? All of a sudden, there's this massive importance on data, which people know is in their organization, but which many are still struggling to kind of get out in some sort of usable way. So this is a really good example of an area where you don't necessarily know how doing the right thing now is going to benefit you in the future, but obviously it's been pretty massive. Although you and I were also talking a little bit about how generative AI can create some kind of artificial data that can train some systems. Do you want to expand on that a little bit here as well?
Yeah, well, before I do that, Greg, I just want to say that ultimately, right, the biggest risk, I think, to our company is that we use AI in the wrong way, right? Open ourselves up. That's our biggest risk. Our second biggest risk is that we don't use AI fast enough and everybody else does, and we're blown out of the water. And so it's really interesting that two of your major risks are actually around how you use this new technology. And that is changing.
Yeah, no, absolutely it is. And I think this is always the kind of duality of AI, right? There's sort of an amazing side and there's always a scary side to it as you see some of the things that are happening out there.
Oh yeah. Now,
But certainly,
sorry, if
go ahead.
I go back to answer your other question, right, in terms of what it can do, just as an example, if there's a document that comes in, and yes, in this world, there's still paper, okay? So there's a document, and that document was 104, comma, and then six digits. Someone might read that as 104 million and assume that another comma was missed in the piece of paper, unless they looked at the whole document and realized, actually, no, it was 104 points. All right. And they went out 6 decimal places. It just happened to be in that culture, they used a comma instead of a point. And so having AI actually be able to recognize that is something that, culturally, a human might not recognize it. So having context where AI can do that, I just think helps and eliminates more and more mistakes in the future if we can get this implemented correctly.
Yeah, yeah. I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk about the other side of the equation. Obviously, the technology is one piece, but employee culture is another really important component as well. What can you tell us about how you've been able to kind of bring the whole team on board when it's time to try something new and maybe get people a little bit outside of their comfort zones?
Yeah, so I would say always starts at the top. Okay, any culture change, people follow the leader, and you have to walk the talk. And so ultimately, that means like I just said, I will tell people I used Copilot and I did these emails. I will send emails internally and tell them this was written by Copilot, just so they understand I'm starting to use AI. If you don't embrace it, then it's not going to work. And let me give you an even simpler example. We have a new CRM. We're using Dynamics. If I keep on Outlook and I don't go into Dynamics and I don't follow up on Dynamics, no one's going to use it. I actually have to go in and say, I saw in Dynamics, here's the data. That doesn't look right. How come? And as soon as people realize the boss is looking, everybody starts to embrace it. So you've got to walk the talk as an executive and use the tech. If you think this is just a young person's game to figure it out, you're done, right? You got to embrace it.
Yeah, no, I love that answer. And I think, again, it's so important to see people embracing it. And you can tell really clearly when you're in an organization where that's not the case, where the senior leadership sort of vaguely knows we need to be embracing technology, but they clearly are resistant themselves. How difficult is it for an employee to get really motivated and to do what needs to be done when they see their boss expressing that kind of resistance as well?
And I'm going to go way back. You may or may not remember, there was a time when executives in the C-suite used to have their assistants print out all their emails for them, all right, and would take them home at night and read. Okay, that actually happened. So this is what I mean. You can't be doing that, all right? You got to jump in.
You still actually see in some email signatures, people say, please consider the environment before printing this email, which always drives me crazy. I'm like, how can that still be a thing? Who's still doing that? So I think the shocking answer is you don't actually have to go that far back to find that behavior. So let's come up to a conclusion here with a kind of super high level question. What's more important long-term? Having the right technologies in place or having the right team in place? Or can you even have one without the other?
Yeah, so I think that's an easy question, Greg. I think that the team is the key, right? The right team will always bring the tech, but I think you need to dig deeper because the way the world's going, it's now how do you define the team? If you think the team is just the group in technology, then you're going to lose, right? So I said we have 14,000 people in my group. The power that's available to all these people to be able to do low code solutions, to be able to use all this AI, we have to figure out how to make sure that team is leveraging that and driving it. They'll find ways, right? The technology's there. They'll push us to bring the new tech. So the right team is always more important than the right tech because basically if you have the right team, they're going to bring the right tech.
No, I love that. I love that philosophy. So we're going to end it there. Pete, I want to thank you again for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure. So much more I'm sure we could talk about, but thanks again for taking the time.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. Great conversation.
The Finovate podcast is produced by Informa Connect in association with Provoke.fm Media. Check out Finovate.com for information on Finovate's upcoming shows and to learn how you can get involved. The discount code Finovate Podcast will save you 20% on tickets to all of our events. And you can email us at info@finovate.com for information on sponsoring, speaking, or demoing. Thanks for listening.